Welcome to True Crime Pulse, where we explore some of the most compelling and true crime stories. Today we uncover the tragic and unsettling case of Jacob Rasmussen, a young man whose promising life was brought to a premature and violent end in the affluent city of Naples, Florida, in August 2016. Jacob Rasmussen was a 20-year-old massage therapist who had recently relocated from his quiet hometown in Minnesota to Naples, in pursuit of new opportunities and a more temperate climate. He had hoped that the move would offer him a fresh start, away from the confines of small-town life. In Naples, Jacob quickly adapted to his new surroundings. His striking good looks, athletic build, and engaging personality made him an instant favorite among his clientele, particularly older women, many of whom frequented his services not only for his skill but for the charismatic charm he effortlessly exuded. Jacob's ability to make people feel special helped him cultivate a strong and loyal client base, allowing him to thrive in his profession. However, his appeal did not stop at professional success. Beyond his work as a massage therapist, Jacob became entangled in the world of sugar babies, a lifestyle that involved forming relationships with older, wealthier individuals in exchange for financial gifts and material luxuries. Among his benefactors was Veronica, a 59-year-old astrologist, and one of his most significant patrons. The benefits of these arrangements were substantial, but they also brought with them inevitable tensions and complications, which Jacob often kept hidden from public view. In the weeks leading up to his untimely death, Jacob appeared to be on an upward trajectory, full of excitement about his future. He had recently received a lavish gift from one of his wealthier clients, an Audi SUV, which he proudly showed off to his friends and posted about on social media. His Instagram feed, a curated reflection of his seemingly carefree life, was filled with images of his new car, as well as plans for an upcoming trip to Disney World with friends, something he had been eagerly anticipating for months. Despite the complexities of his relationships and the delicate balancing act between his professional life and personal entanglements, Jacob remained optimistic, known for his infectious smile, light-hearted demeanor, and unwavering ambition. To his friends and clients, Jacob Rasmussen was the epitome of youthful energy and potential. His ability to project confidence and positivity masked any turmoil beneath the surface. However, despite his outward appearance of control, Jacob's life was more complicated than most realized. He navigated a world where attraction, money, and power were intertwined in ways that could easily spiral out of control. And yet, no one could have predicted the tragic turn his life would take. On the morning of August 12, 2016, the first indication that something was terribly wrong came from Jacob's elderly neighbor, 95-year-old Linda Martino. Linda, a retired school teacher from Brooklyn, formed a close rapport with Jacob after he moved into the Naples apartment complex. They frequently exchanged pleasantries in the hallway, and Linda often admired Jacob's youthful optimism and the energy he brought to their otherwise quiet community. However, over the preceding days, Linda had grown increasingly concerned. Jacob's Audi, usually a symbol of his active social life, had remained parked in the same spot for 2 consecutive weeks, a highly unusual occurrence given Jacob's typically busy schedule and outgoing nature. At approximately 9 a.m. on August 12th, Linda, her concerns growing, decided to check on her neighbor. After knocking on Jacob's door and receiving no response, she remembered that he had entrusted her with a spare key for emergencies. Her sense of unease mounting, Linda unlocked the door and entered the apartment. The moment she stepped inside, something felt wrong. The condo was unnervingly silent, and an unpleasant faint odor lingered in the air. The smell, although not overpowering, was unmistakably off, an unsettling contrast to the neat, orderly appearance of the apartment. Calling out Jacob's name, Linda made her way cautiously through the living room. Nothing seemed immediately amiss. The space was tidy, with a V-ceiling television mounted on the wall and a few magazines, including the latest issue of Jew, neatly arranged on the coffee table. But the air of normalcy was deceiving. As Linda proceeded further into the apartment, her anxiety deepened. When she reached the bathroom, her worst fears were realized. Jacob's lifeless body lay face down in the toilet, his head submerged in water, his body limp and devoid of movement. He was naked, and the sight was horrifying. Overcome with shock and terror, Linda screamed, stumbling backward as her heart raced. Her mind reeled from the sheer horror of what she had just witnessed. Desperate for help, Linda fled the apartment, her hands shaking as she called 911. Her voice trembled as she spoke to the operator, struggling to explain the macabre scene she had just discovered. "I think my neighbor is dead," she stammered, the words barely escaping her lips. "He's in his bathroom. It looks like something terrible happened to him." The 911 operator, sensing the urgency and distress in Linda's voice, stayed on the line, attempting to keep her calm until authorities could arrive. Meanwhile, Linda, still in shock, paced back and forth in her apartment, glancing nervously at Jacob's door, unable to shake the horrifying image from her mind. It was difficult to reconcile the vibrant young man she had known just days before, who had spoken excitedly about his upcoming Disney trip, with the grim reality of the lifeless body she had just found. Within minutes, officers from the Naples Police Department arrived at the scene. Detective Samuel Jenkins, a veteran investigator renowned for his meticulous attention to detail, was assigned to lead the investigation. Accompanying him was Officer Karen Blake, a sharp-witted investigator known for her intuition and composed demeanor. Together, they approached Jacob's apartment with a sense of foreboding, aware that something far more sinister than an accidental death awaited them inside. Upon entering the apartment, Detective Jenkins and Officer Blake were struck by the eerie stillness of the scene. The living room, with its neatly arranged furniture and lack of any visible signs of struggle, contrasted sharply with the unsettling smell that permeated the air. It was the kind of silence that, to experienced detectives, spoke volumes, a silence that suggested the presence of hidden violence beneath the surface. So the officers cautiously made their way toward the bathroom, where Jacob's body lay. It became clear that this case was anything but ordinary. The investigation into Jacob Rasmussen's death had only just begun, but the tragic discovery marked the start of a complex and deeply disturbing case, one that would soon expose the dark undercurrents of Jacob's life and reveal a web of secrets, desires, and dangers that ultimately led to his untimely demise. The bathroom was small, with white tiles and a modern shower, contrasting the grim scene that unfolded inside. Jacob's naked body was slumped over the toilet, his head submerged in the water. The initial sight was unsettling. There were no immediate signs of a break-in, no overturned furniture, no shattered glass, but something was undeniably wrong. The air felt thick with the tension of violence, invisible yet palpable. Jacob had been forcibly drowned. His head had been shoved into the toilet, and the bruises on his arms and neck painted a grim picture of the struggle that had taken place before his death. Detective Samuel Jenkins took in the scene, his trained eyes absorbing every detail. The position of the body, the bruising pattern, all indicated that Jacob had fought back with every ounce of his strength, but it hadn't been enough. The attacker had overpowered him, and now Jacob lay lifeless in the clean, sterile bathroom. Outside the small bathroom, the apartment remained oddly undisturbed. Nothing seemed out of place, but the absence of chaos only made the crime more chilling. The police team moved efficiently, documenting every corner. Photographs were taken, fingerprints dusted for, and potential clues cataloged. They found a set of kitchen knives neatly arranged in a block on the counter, but none appeared to be missing. Everything was orderly, almost too orderly, as if the killer had gone to great lengths to clean up after themselves. Officer Karen Blake, assisting Detective Jenkins, discovered Jacob's phone on the kitchen counter. It was a new model, an iPhone 6's, sleek and likely containing a wealth of information about Jacob's final days. Carefully, she placed it into an evidence bag, knowing that the phone might hold the key to understanding the victim's last movements and interactions. The investigation took a methodical turn. Jenkins and his team began knocking on doors, speaking with neighbors in the apartment complex. Most knew little about Jacob, but one neighbor, Linda Martino, offered a few helpful insights. She mentioned seeing a few of Jacob's clients come and go over the past week. Jacob was a personal trainer, but nothing had seemed particularly out of the ordinary. However, she did note a new Audi sub that Jacob had recently acquired, a curious detail considering his modest income. Back inside the apartment, the forensic team meticulously combed through every inch. Luminol was sprayed across surfaces to detect any trace of blood invisible to the naked eye, but the results were clean. The lack of blood and other obvious evidence hinted that the killer had been careful, very careful. It was rare for a murder scene to be this spotless. As Jenkins sifted through the details, a timeline of Jacob's last hours began to emerge. He hoped that both the phone and the building's security cameras would shed more light on the mystery. But the clean state of the apartment and the calculated nature of the attack suggested that the killer was no amateur. Whoever had taken Jacob's life had done so with precision and intent. The tragic scene at Jacob's apartment marked the beginning of what Jenkins and Blake knew would be a challenging case. They were up against a methodical killer, someone who had erased nearly every trace of their presence. Yet they were determined to solve the puzzle. Their first lead pointed to Veronica Hayes, a 59-year-old astrologist with a dramatic flair. Veronica was a well-known figure in Naples, revered for her celestial predictions and with a client list that included a few local celebrities. She lived in a mansion adorned with rare crystals and zodiac symbols, an outward symbol of her eclectic personality. Veronica had also been in a sexual relationship with Jacob, her young lover. As a self-proclaimed sugar mommy, Veronica had lavished Jacob with extravagant gifts, including the 70-inch flat-screen TV now sitting in his living room. When the police first questioned her, Veronica presented herself as calm, albeit shaken by the news of Jacob's death. She admitted that discovering Jacob had been seeing other women had hurt her deeply, but she swore she had nothing to do with his murder. Jenkins and Blake, experienced in reading subtle shifts in behavior, noticed Veronica's calm facade crack ever so slightly when they asked about her whereabouts on the night of Jacob's death. She claimed that, true to her Virgo nature, she had been at home meditating and reading astrology today, nursing her wounds privately after their recent falling out. She emphasized that as a Scorpio, Jacob had always needed his space, and she had been respecting that. The police, however, found Veronica's background more than a little concerning. She had a history of intense, tumultuous relationships, 3 failed marriages, all of which had ended in messy divorces. Friends and former clients described her as generous but controlling, someone whose jealousy could be triggered easily. More troubling were the multiple text messages she had sent Jacob in the days leading up to his death. Some were affectionate, but as time passed, the tone of the messages shifted, growing more accusatory, desperate, and venomous. Despite these troubling signs, there was no direct evidence linking Veronica to the crime scene. She had an alibi, albeit one based on her own account, and without solid proof, the police couldn't make an arrest. Jenkins kept her on their radar, aware that her increasingly erratic behavior and history of jealousy made her a prime suspect. But Veronica wasn't the only one under scrutiny. The second suspect was Bryony Mitchell Keynes, a 68-year-old Australian millionaire with a notorious past. Bryony had moved to Naples after facing scandal in Australia over accusations of exploiting asylum seekers for cheap labor in her restaurant empire. Despite her legal troubles, Bryony had managed to maintain her high society status in Naples, attending lavish parties and events. Bryony, like Veronica, had been involved with Jacob. She, too, had showered him with gifts, including the sleek Audi sub parked outside his apartment. When questioned, Bryony was cooperative, but her guarded demeanor made Jenkins suspicious. She claimed to have been at a high-profile masquerade ball at the Naples Grand Beach Resort on the night of Jacob's death, mingling with other wealthy attendees. Several prominent socialites could vouch for her presence. However, when the conversation turned to Jacob's other relationships, Bryony's composure faltered. Her irritation was palpable, and Jenkins noted her defensiveness when asked if she had known about Jacob's involvement with other women. Though she denied any jealousy, her reaction suggested otherwise. The investigation into Jacob's death was far from straightforward. Both Veronica and Bryony had motives: jealousy, anger, betrayal, yet neither could be definitively placed at the crime scene. As Jenkins and Blake continued to gather evidence, it became clear that this case would demand patience, precision, and more than a little luck. The pieces of the puzzle were there, but fitting them together would be a delicate task. Upon reviewing the footage from Paddy Murphy's bar, the police noticed that Marcus had left the bar during the 2-hour gap in which Jacob Rasmussen was believed to have been murdered. This new information, combined with the discovery of the pawn bracelet, placed Marcus at the forefront of the investigation. Under increasing pressure, Marcus began to falter in his responses. He maintained that he and Jacob had a complicated relationship, but denied any involvement in his death. However, his alibi for the 2-hour window became increasingly questionable, as none of his friends could account for his whereabouts during that time. Detective Jenkins and Officer Blake decided to bring in Marcus for a polygraph test. Although polygraph tests are not admissible in court, they hoped it would help them determine whether Marcus was being truthful. The results were inconclusive, but Marcus's growing anxiety throughout the interrogation only raised further doubts about his innocence. Meanwhile, the police continued to investigate Bryony Keynes and Veronica Hayes, hoping to rule out their involvement definitively. Though both women had motives, neither had a concrete link to the murder, leaving Marcus as the primary suspect. The investigation into Jacob's death had now reached a critical point. With the new evidence against Marcus and his increasingly inconsistent statements, the police felt they were closer to uncovering the truth. However, without direct proof, they couldn't yet make an arrest. The Naples Police Department ramped up their efforts, re-interviewing witnesses and combing through phone records, hoping to find the final piece of evidence that would solve Jacob Rasmussen's murder once and for all. The case of Jacob Rasmussen's murder and the subsequent trial of Veronica Hayes not only captured the attention of Naples, Florida, but also sparked national debate about the intersection of justice, wealth, and unconventional legal defenses. What began as a tragic and brutal crime morphed into a complex legal drama marked by jealousy, obsession, and an unusual defense rooted in astrology. Jacob Rasmussen, a young and charismatic man in his early 20s, had moved to Naples to build a new life. Known for his charm and good looks, he quickly attracted the attention of several older women, including Veronica Hayes. Veronica, a 59-year-old astrologist, was well known in the local community for her extravagant lifestyle and strong personality. She hosted astrology readings and lavish parties at her mansion, where the walls were adorned with zodiac symbols and crystals. While many saw her as a generous and captivating figure, those closest to her knew about her darker side, one that became particularly dangerous when it came to her romantic relationships. Veronica and Jacob's relationship started innocently, but as time went on, it became clear that Veronica's feelings for him had crossed into obsession. What had begun as a consensual, transactional affair, where Jacob received lavish gifts like expensive dinners and even designer clothes, soon spiraled out of control. Veronica grew possessive, her jealousy intensifying when she discovered that Jacob was involved with other older women, some of whom also showered him with gifts. The tipping point came when Veronica learned about the expensive car given to Jacob by another lover, which she saw as the ultimate betrayal. On the night of August 1, 2016, Veronica's simmering rage boiled over. She confronted Jacob at his apartment about the new car and accused him of using her for her money while seeing other women behind her back. What began as a verbal argument quickly escalated into violence. In a fit of uncontrollable rage, Veronica attacked Jacob, overpowering him and forcing his head into the toilet. She held him down, drowning him in the water. Jacob struggled, leaving bruises on his arms and neck as he fought for his life, but he eventually succumbed to the attack. Veronica, in a twisted effort to humiliate him further, stripped off his clothes and left him naked, attempting to stage the scene as a suicide to cover her tracks. Detective Samuel Jenkins and Officer Karen Blake of the Naples Police Department were assigned to investigate Jacob's death. From the outset, Jenkins suspected foul play. The scene seemed too deliberate to be a simple suicide. The investigation quickly revealed a web of deception and betrayal, with multiple suspects coming under scrutiny. One of the initial suspects was Marcus Dean, a rival of Jacob's, who had a history of altercations with him. Another was Bryony Mitchell Keynes, an older woman who had also been involved with Jacob and had her own motives. However, as the investigation deepened, all signs began to point to Veronica. Key pieces of evidence solidified the case against her. Phone records showed that Veronica had been near Jacob's apartment at the time of the murder, despite her alibi that she had been at home meditating and reading astrology charts. Forensic analysis of Veronica's clothing revealed traces of Jacob's blood, linking her directly to the crime scene. Additionally, security footage from nearby buildings showed Veronica entering Jacob's apartment shortly before the estimated time of death. By August 22, 2016, the police had gathered enough evidence to make an arrest. Detectives arrived at Veronica's mansion, where she was taken into custody. The arrest sent shockwaves through Naples, a quiet, affluent community that had been rocked by the murder. Veronica, once regarded as a respected figure in the social scene, now found herself at the center of a criminal investigation. Her confident demeanor cracked as she was handcuffed and led to the police car, protesting that she was being unfairly targeted due to her wealth and astrological beliefs. Veronica's trial, which began in October 2016, drew national attention, not just because of the brutal nature of the crime, but also because of the defense her attorney, Nancy Price, chose to pursue. Price, a lawyer known for her unorthodox methods, argued that Veronica was the victim of astrological discrimination. She claimed that Veronica, a Virgo, was being unfairly stereotyped as meticulous and controlling because of her zodiac sign, and that this bias had colored the investigation from the start. Price brought in astrologers and experts who testified about the characteristics of Virgos, attempting to frame Veronica's actions as a result of her star sign, rather than a premeditated murder. The defense also leaned heavily into Veronica's public persona as a generous and spiritual woman, portraying her as someone incapable of committing such a heinous act. Veronica herself took the stand, tearfully insisting that Jacob's death had been a tragic accident. She claimed that while she had argued with him, she never intended to kill him, and that the drowning occurred in the heat of the moment. Veronica painted herself as a victim, stating that she was being prosecuted because of her wealth and eccentric lifestyle. Outside the courthouse, groups like Virgos United and Americans Against Birth Sign Discrimination protested in support of Veronica, holding signs and demanding justice for what they saw as astrological bias. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Martin Delgado, methodically dismantled the defense's arguments. Delgado, known for his tough stance on violent crime, presented a mountain of evidence that showed Veronica's jealousy and possessiveness had reached dangerous levels. He argued that Veronica had planned the murder, knowing full well that Jacob had been seeing other women and that she could no longer control him. Delgado called witnesses who testified about Veronica's increasingly erratic behavior in the months leading up to the murder, highlighting her obsession with Jacob and her violent tendencies when she felt threatened. The trial lasted several weeks, with the courtroom packed with journalists, community members, and curious onlookers. The case had become a media sensation, with every detail of the trial being scrutinized and debated. Despite the prosecution's strong case, the defense's strategy of astrological discrimination gained traction with some jurors. On November 15, 2016, the jury returned a surprising verdict. Veronica was found guilty of manslaughter instead of second-degree murder. She was sentenced to 10 years in prison. The verdict sent shockwaves through Naples and beyond. Many were outraged, believing that Veronica's wealth and influence had played a role in the reduced sentence. Jacob's family, who had been devastated by his death, felt that justice had not been served. They believed that Veronica should have been convicted of murder and given a harsher sentence. The media followed the family's grief and frustration, turning them into symbols of the pursuit of justice for victims of violent crime. Veronica's trial sparked widespread debate about the role of unconventional defenses in the legal system and the influence of public opinion on judicial decisions. The case became a cautionary tale about how personal biases, whether astrological or financial, can sway legal outcomes. Veronica herself remained defiant, continuing to claim that she had been unfairly targeted. During her time at the Florida Women's Reception Center, a medium-security prison, she began writing letters and articles about her experience, becoming a controversial figure in both astrological and legal circles. Jacob's murder and Veronica's trial left a lasting impact on the community of Naples. The case highlighted issues of justice, privilege, and the influence of wealth on legal outcomes, while also shining a light on the more bizarre aspects of the legal system. For Jacob's family and friends, the pain of his loss would never truly heal, but they continued to advocate for harsher penalties for crimes of passion, hoping to prevent others from suffering the same fate. Veronica Hayes' trial, with its strange mix of astrology, jealousy, and obsession, would be remembered as one of the most unusual and polarizing cases in recent Florida history.